How's it going, Wildlife? So this past weekend, Johnny talked to us about motives and asked us the question, why do you do what you do? And in discussing this, Johnny reminded us of Romans chapter 12, verse 2, which reminds us that as Christians, we need to be living differently than the world around us. And so before I kind of dig into verse 2, I would like to go back to verse 1 to help set that up and give us a little bit of context. And so verse 1 says, "Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship." So because God has showed us mercy through sending his son Jesus to die for us on the cross, we owe him our lives as a living sacrifice, which is our true and proper worship. And so what that means is worship is more than just singing a song on Wednesdays or Saturdays or Sundays. It's the way we live our lives. And you might be asking, how do I live my life as a life of worship and as a living sacrifice to God? And verse 2 tells us that. It says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." So for us to live lives of worship, we need to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. And that's done in two ways. Done by digging into God's word and submitting to him in prayer. And in that, we let God transform us. It's not us transforming ourselves, but him transforming us to be more like his son, Jesus. And so, when we go about this transformation, we need to ask ourselves three very important questions. Number one is, am I letting God transform me? We must ask ourselves if there's anything holding us back. Maybe it's us not letting God. Maybe there's something getting in the way. Maybe it's an idol we have. Maybe it's something that we're putting above God that we would rather have. And so we need to ask ourselves that question of, well, am I letting him transform me? And the second question we have to ask ourselves is, where must I allow God to transform me? All of us have areas in our life, and very many of them where we need to be less like ourselves and more like Jesus. And so we need to ask God, please show me those areas in my life where I need to be transformed. And we can do that in God's word and saying, well, maybe I'm not living up to what it says. And that's going to reveal to us, well, yeah, Jesus, this is the area, and these are the areas I need to be more like you. And the third question we need to ask ourselves, once we have found those areas that we need to be more like Jesus and we need to be transformed, we must ask ourselves, how am I going to submit to him? Maybe it's that we're disrespectful to our parents and we're going to change the way we talk to them. Maybe it's that we're spending too much time on social media and not enough time in God's word, and so it's starting a devotional plan. It can be a million different things. Maybe it's us not wanting to take the trash out when our parents tell us to, and us being more proactive about that. And so we need to be asking ourselves these questions, looking at where we need to transform, and then, finding the ways God's revealing and going and doing them. And so when we're transformed by God, we no longer conform to the pattern of this world. And we will have renewed minds. Not only when we have renewed minds, we will also have a renewed motive. We will have renewed motives for the things that we do. We will no longer want to do things for ourselves, but our motives will be to glorify God in what we're doing. And so when we do that, when we have renewed minds and renewed motives, our lives will be offered to him as a living sacrifice, and that will be true and proper worship. And so it all comes full circle. So when we submit to God through prayer and digging into his word, he will transform us to be more like him.